Hello, how the tech are you? This time I'm going to start with David. How the tech are you?
Just like last week, tech and great.
Same with HK? Okay.
I am also tech and great. I'm excited for today's stories.
All right. I'm kind of excited. I got some good stuff this week. So anyways, for everybody listening, this is our weekly tech show on Echoplex Media. I was going to say tech news, but we're not just news. It's really like any tech type stuff we feel like covering. I'm historian Matt. I generally do news stories, anything tech related. I do have some science related stuff and techie law kind of stuff this time for today. But actually my summary of what I'm going to cover is first up is say hi to Sagittarius A star. Then Texas judges don't understand YouTube. And finally, websites are stealing more of your data than you think. It's a nice clickbaity final title. So the pink mic, who we've already mentioned.
All right. I am HK Perrin, and I tend to cover software development news, and I have some real big news for particularly software developers that a whole lot of other people have been interested in and have been sharing some not quite accurate information. But Nvidia released their Linux kernel module as open source. So one thing to note is this is not the same thing as releasing their entire proprietary GPU driver as open source. That's not what they did. So I'll talk more about that in my segment, and let's head over to Dave.
So yeah, I've got 3 stories this week. One, there's a Linux-powered Mars helicopter. I have rover here on my thing, but it's a helicopter that is friends with the rover, we'll say. And it had a little bit of trouble. They believe the solar panels got dusty or something, and it wasn't creating any electricity. Well, it's back. It was able to talk to the rover again. So maybe, I don't know, the wind blew it off, or it, gathered enough sunlight or whatever. That's the first story. I also got daily builds for Ubuntu 22.10 just dropped. So if you'd like an unstable Ubuntu to go along with your very stable LTS, that's what you got. And Fedora 36 dropped recently, and the reviews for it are real good. And I'm just going to go over a few things that are in Fedora for people who maybe want a good GNOME workstation and don't want to run Ubuntu.
All right. Guess I'll get started with my topics. But first, we have the image up.
We will in a sec.
Okay. Well, I'll get started. So the image that you'll eventually see, and you can look it up, is Sagittarius A star. Yay! That's actually the super massive black hole at the center of our galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy. And we just got a really good image of it. We directly imaged it using radio telescopes located around the world. This is the second time we have directly imaged a black hole. This is the first time for Sagittarius A star. The previous one was Messier 87, I think, star, M87 star, which is a black hole in a nearby galaxy. It's the center of another nearby galaxy. The reason we did that one first is it is much, much bigger. It's about 1,000 times bigger. Though it's much further away, it actually is a little bit bigger in the amount of the sky it takes up, is basically. So we can see it a little better. But then people have been trying to take a picture of Sagittarius A star for quite a while, and we've finally done it. So Sagittarius A star is only 27,000 light years away. So, right in our backyard, right? Pretty close. And 4 million solar masses, which is, for a supermassive black hole, that's not that big, but is, a lot bigger than our star. Solar mass is the size of the sun, basically, the mass of the sun. And to get a picture of it, we needed to use a telescope basically the size of the Earth. But of course, we couldn't do that because, we've got other stuff we got to do with the Earth, like living and stuff and planning things. So what they did is they cheated and used a bunch of different telescopes scattered around the world or, around the disk for those flat earthers listening, which I'm sure there's plenty of them. And then, of course, they had to synchronize their images, which they used, pocket watches to do that, right? And by pocket watch, I mean an atomic clock accurate down to the femtosecond. So no big deal there, right?
Probably doesn't fit in your pocket, though.
Probably not. Yeah, unless you have like really big pockets.
So it wasn't like, it wasn't swatches, right?
Wasn't swatches, no. It's very long baseline interferometry. These big words are hard to say. I don't know what's going on with that in my mouth. That is I think that's the program they use to align all these different telescopes. And they actually generated like petabytes of data that they had to go through and combine to make the image. And a petabyte is 1 million gigabytes for those wondering. And what they had to do was basically they were taking almost a video of it. They took thousands and thousands of images and averaged them together to produce the final image that we see, which is why it's kind of blurry because it's an average of images, but it's kind of the best we can do with what we got. Possibly in the future, we may see an actual video of it, but that hasn't been released yet. But they did take images over, hours, multiple days, and should be able to produce an image where you actually see like stuff changing a bit. Some of the hot spots getting cooler and dark spots getting brighter. That sort of thing.
I mean, I'm sure eventually the technology will get better. Yeah. One thing you mentioned is the reason we photoed the other black hole first is because it's much bigger than the black hole at the center of our galaxy. Another reason that we did that is when we look at that black hole, we just look straight at it. But when we look at the black hole in the center of our galaxy, we have to look through all the gas and stars that are in our galaxy.
Yeah. That's a good point. I don't know if there's any stars blocking the way or if they had to wait for stars blocking the way.
There might be stars like transiting over it, but I'm sure they don't. Really.
Trying to get this
if you look around, you can
difference.
actually see an image of stars orbiting the black hole very quickly.
Honey, I can't get this picture of the black hole. There keeps being stars in the way. I'm trying to get this picture. Trying to get this picture for you. All right.
And for size reference, I think that image, like all of the main part of the bright part, I guess you could say, fits like inside the orbit of Mercury. I think is that about that size.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and you
it's
compare
actually,
that to the bigger one, the Messier 87 star. That one, that same part of it, the glowy kind of orangey part, that same part of that one could fit our entire solar system.
Yeah.
Like out to Pluto.
Guess Pluto is part of our solar system, even though it's not a planet anymore.
Yeah, it's a dwarf planet. So yeah.
So that's all I got for that. Any other questions on Sagittarius A star?
That's
Okay,
pretty
moving
cool.
on. We got so Texas judges don't understand YouTube. So this is sort of the law kind of and tech colliding in horrible ways. I was going to say funny, but it's really not that funny. But a court in Texas basically screwed over some internet law, and because they think YouTube isn't a website, but instead sort of an ISP, but they don't seem to know what ISP means, so don't quite get it. It's the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals decided in favor of Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton in a lawsuit over HB 20, which is a bizarre law effectively banning many apps and websites from moderating posts by Texas residents. So this has a lot to do with basically conservatives complaining about them getting banned, or shadow banned is the other one, fun one that they like to talk about, for what they think is their ideas, right? Just their opinions about politics and stuff like that. I don't know how true that is. They also tend to be, they tend to have other reasons to be banned at the same time. So it's really hard, but Texas has decided to make this law to keep that from happening. Keep people with, they're obviously targeting people with conservative ideas getting banned from these sites. But so HB 20 is the law, and it bans social media platforms from removing, downranking, demonetizing, or otherwise discriminating against content based on the viewpoint of the user or another person. It applies to any internet website or application that hits 50 million monthly active users and enables users to communicate with others. So there's supposed to be bigger websites and applications, stuff that, so a small mom and pop, I don't know, social media website shouldn't be a problem. I don't know if there's that many around. And apparently there's exceptions, loopholes brought out for ISPs and media sites. So media sites, basically news sites, because they don't want their own like news to be blocked or something like that. A part of this law, because the obvious solution to this is just these big social networks just blocking anybody based in Texas. The law includes a provision saying you can't ban them based on their location in Texas. So that's not going to work. I don't know how enforceable that is, but
yeah, if you just remove your service from Texas, like,
then somebody in Texas can
how are
sue
they
you.
gonna go after you? You're not operating in Texas.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, this is a federal court. The Fifth Circuit is a
well,
federal
But it's a
court.
state law.
I think it's a state law, yeah.
Oh, that's weird.
So I'm not entirely sure how that would work. What else? So there was an argument that social media companies should be treated as common carriers because of their market power. Of course, they're not common carriers in any way, shape, or form. And but this idea is that they would be required to treat all content neutrally in a way that phone companies do, which is kind of ironic because actual ISPs that carry the internet do not have the same provisions because net neutrality was blocked by Republicans in the Senate and House. And actually I think ultimately it was I don't remember what agency blocked it during, I think it was Trump's administration.
It was Ajit Pai, the FCC.
FCC, that was right. When
Yeah.
he was head of the FCC, he didn't block rules, he just ended rules for net neutrality on ISPs. So actual ISPs, which these judges don't seem to understand what they are, they are allowed to block content for pretty much any reason because of those rule changes. Apparently one of the judges...
It's the old, I can do it to you, but you can't do it to me.
Yeah, right. Let's see. So one of the judges, I think it was Edith Jones, said that it's talking about, I think YouTube, said it's not a website. Your clients are internet providers. They're not websites. Which is completely untrue. In fact, factually false. And that was just really weird. But
I'm pretty positive no one's ever bought internet from YouTube.
Yeah. You don't buy internet from YouTube. Maybe from the parent company, but not YouTube. And I don't have it written down, but I think the same judge had a weird definition of ISP. It was like not internet service provider, but like interactive service provider, I think is what they thought it was, which would cover websites or something. It's really weird. Some people. So hopefully we'll see what happens. I'm sure it's going to be appealed again, taken to another court. It's just crazy.
Yeah, this
Any other
is stupid.
questions or comments?
This is stupid.
Yes.
So, I mean, first of all, why do they want different rules for the internet in Texas? I don't understand. Like, what do they mean you can't block a Texan? Like, how do you even enforce that? Like,
I don't know, but again, I think it's because so many conservatives are being kicked off of social media platforms for reasons, and it's not because of their ideas, unless their ideas are
because they're promoting violence.
Yeah.
This is just like
Texas is very pro-violence.
Well, Texas has been advertising itself like as this pro-business place that all of these tech companies should go to, and it's just very odd now that you juxtapose that, like that claim that they were making for a while, with this law. This is a very, very anti-business. It's almost like you're basically telling somebody who runs a data center that they can no longer use that data center as they see fit to operate their business. That seems
like it would be like if someone were running like I don't know, drug operations on your servers in your data center, and you were like, hey, stop. And they were like, no, we're just going to tell Governor Abbott that you're trying to get us to stop because of our beliefs.
Yeah.
And then it gets into like, do botnets have a viewpoint? Like, I just start to wonder, like this is a giant mess.
That's a whole other issue. But maybe Silk Road will move over to Texas servers or something. See what happens there. Let's see. My final section I want to talk about is websites are stealing more of your data than you think. Again, nice clickbaity title. Maybe some of you are aware of this. I wasn't aware of this specific issue, though I'm not surprised. But basically, some new research came out that after scanning the top 100,000 websites, a certain number of them seem to collect not just everything that you submit in forms, but everything you type in before you even submit forms. So as soon as you start typing, in some cases, other cases, it's like right before, like when you leave the field and go on to the next field, they collect that. Sometimes it's like purely like key logging type stuff. I would say it's scary, but I'm not that surprised actually. But
so like there's definitely a use case for this. You know, if a user goes in and like puts in their email address or something because they're going to sign up for your system and then decides not to, you as a shitty business can just email them anyway.
Yep.
Be like, hey, I saw you typed in your email address into my website. You sure you don't want to come over and buy some of these drugs?
We're in Texas. It's legal for you to buy drugs here. We can't be banned for it. Wait, but isn't there a good use case for this too? Like if people, like if you wanted to figure out why people aren't filling out forms, and you could find out maybe they get frustrated at a certain part of your form or whatever, and you could use that to make your forms better. So like there has to be, like there must be a good use for like what you're describing, where you fill in a part of a form but never hit submit. Right? There's an ethical use for that too, and that's probably maybe what people had intended, and folks are misusing it.
It sounds pretty dubious because like I don't know if they need the actual data. They just need to know when you stopped or something, like what field you stopped on, not necessarily what you're entering, right?
Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. I've tried to fill out it keeps telling me that a certain part of a form is wrong. And like if you were making a website and then if you keep finding out that people can't fill it out, maybe you would want to know what I tried to type into there, because you'd be like, well, what rule have I set that makes it so this person can't answer this question this way? You know, there's an ethical reason for that. I just doubt that's not how it's generally used.
No,
I would say if the user didn't consent to that, I would consider it unethical.
Yeah.
You know, for the same reason as like, you know, when you download an app and it's got a checkbox that says like, allow us to collect anonymous usage data. Like if they leave that checked, sure, that's totally fine. So like as a website, if you opened up a little checkbox that says, allow us to collect anonymous usage data, and the user hit okay, then that's fine. But if the user didn't consent to that, to me, that seems unethical.
Yeah. These researchers, which apparently are from KU Leuven, I don't know. Some of the names are kind of weird. Radboud University and University of Lausanne. I don't know any of those at all. But they're apparently real universities. I think they're all based in Europe, so they're not places that I know or can pronounce properly. They seem to think that they're grabbing emails, particularly on websites. So they have about 1,844 websites gathered EU users' email addresses without their consent, and 2,950 US users' emails of some form, in some forms, that are being collected. And they think they're being used to basically collect the emails, not to just like respond to them and say, hey, why you didn't finish filling out your form, but to basically sell the emails to spammers or something like that. A lot of them seem to be involved with third-party marketing and analytics services. So, those little scripts that websites add from third parties to show ads or do all sorts of other things. Some of them seem to be grabbing the data, not the website itself, which is very creepy.
Yeah. The website's content security policy should prevent that.
Right.
Like, an ad shouldn't be able to run JavaScript on your website.
Yeah.
You ever been to a conspiracy theory website, HK? There's just all kinds of stuff running that doesn't need to be running on conspiracy theory websites.
I mean, just like if that's true, that it's really the ad collecting the data instead of the actual website, like it's still the fault of the website because the website's not configured correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. Apparently, there's 52 different websites that are, I think it's third parties, 52 different third parties, including the Russian tech giant Yandex, that were collecting these passwords, or not passwords, form data. Sometimes they were actually collecting passwords, but it's apparently the hash password, not the actual password, in some instances, and they seem to be accidental, but from the actual website, not the third parties, I think. So a number of these issues have been resolved, and if you're really worried about it, there is a Firefox extension called Leak Inspector, that will detect these rogue collections on different websites. So you can see what's being collected. I don't know if you can actually block it. Of course, script block should help block it, but you have to have that on and blocking the right stuff before you go to the website.
Also, Brave has some of that stuff built in, the Brave browser.
Yeah.
But for normal users, as people may watch the other shows, sometimes we do have problems with a Brave browser and like web players, sometimes, usually local news websites or whatever, for whatever reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is just a lot more reason to use a password manager.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
If you're not already. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, it doesn't really... That's a good reason to use certain email providers that give you really good spam protection. Hint, hint.
I'm making one of those.
Yeah.
I'll talk about it once it's like open publicly.
Well, like once it's in beta at least, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's all I have. What's up next? HK?
Yeah. All right. So I'm sure a lot of the people listening to this show right now have heard that Nvidia released their driver for Linux. But that's not entirely the whole story. NVIDIA's graphics driver in particular consists of basically 4 different parts. It consists of firmware to interact with the actual hardware. It consists of an OS independent portion of a kernel driver, which the same code basically runs on Windows and Linux and any other operating system that have like Unix operating systems. And then a kernel dependent version of the or a kernel dependent part of the kernel driver. That would be, in this case, specific to the Linux kernel. And then there's user mode or userland utilities, things like their CUDA utilities and their implementation of Vulkan. So all of these things make up their entire graphics driver, and that's normally you'd be downloading all of them when you download the proprietary Nvidia driver. And they didn't release all of those. They only released the OS independent and the OS dependent parts of their kernel driver. So basically, or their kernel module. So basically, they released the entirety of their kernel module. Now, again, it's still not the same as the proprietary one. Even if you take those two parts out of the proprietary one, it's still not the same. These are specific. These are like specifically open source versions of them that aren't the same. But that does mean a lot of really good things for Linux and specifically for Nouveau, the open source NVIDIA driver. That driver it originally started as a reverse engineered project. So basically, a bunch of software engineers decided we want an open source NVIDIA driver. So we're going to figure out what the NVIDIA driver is doing to talk to the hardware, and we're going to re-implement that so that we can talk to the hardware the same way, but be part of the Linux kernel. And they did that, and it worked really well for a long time. And then NVIDIA started signing the firmware, like cryptographically signing the firmware and requiring that the firmware be signed in order to do certain things for in the hardware. Things like changing the clock speed of your driver, which is very important. It's something that, if your graphics driver can't change the clock speed of your driver, basically your graphics driver can't actually use your hardware. Like your video card just kind of sits at its base clock, like its lowest clock, which is not very helpful if you're trying to run a video game. So what this means, not yet, but in the future, Nouveau probably will be able to control a lot more of the NVIDIA hardware in a graphics card. They'll probably be able to boost the clock speed. They'll probably be able to use some of the more advanced features, things like NVENC, which I don't believe Nouveau can use NVENC in the newer cards. I could be wrong though. And it means that probably eventually, years down the road, we'll be able to get a Mesa driver for NVIDIA hardware. Mesa is a 3D and 2D graphics acceleration library for Linux. So what it does is Mesa handles all of the calls from applications, and it turns it into what the hardware can understand. And it uses all these different drivers, and the one that it uses for NVIDIA cards is Nouveau. So you can run Mesa on NVIDIA video cards right now with just the Linux kernel, but all those caveats that I explained earlier apply. So you're not getting the best performance out of your hardware. And with this first step, hopefully it's a good sign that NVIDIA will continue to work with the Nouveau team. NVIDIA actually has been working with the Nouveau team. The firmware that the Nouveau team uses comes from NVIDIA. It's just not signed, doesn't have that same capability of unlocking all of the potential of a graphics card. But hopefully this means that NVIDIA will continue to work with the Nouveau developers, with the Linux team, and try and get these drivers into the kernel and try and get them to work with all the existing code that's in there, and get them to work with things like Mesa, because that would make application development a lot easier.
Yeah. So does this mean, like, I installed Ubuntu on a laptop recently and had a lot of trouble? It turned out it was the drivers for the video card, which is Nvidia.
Yeah. As of right now, there's essentially going to be no change. These drivers aren't ready for your use case. They have a graphics stack. Like, there are parts to implement displays on their graphics cards, but they're not finished yet. They're, like, according to NVIDIA, they call them alpha quality, which means they're very early in production, and they're not suitable to run as your everyday driver.
Yeah. It was really kind of the install process for Ubuntu that was a problem, because they wouldn't use the proprietary drivers unless you, like, manually switched it over, but it would lock up if it was running for too long on the open source one. So you had to, find the place to change it over before the screen locked.
Yeah, that's another thing that the open source drivers currently can't do, is they can't handle the power of the card. Like, the card kind of
Like
it'll handle its power state incorrectly.
Okay.
I believe. I could have that wrong. But also with the proprietary drivers, power management is a mess. So, it's NVIDIA for a while has had just like really awful experience on Linux. Like, it's been an awful experience using NVIDIA drivers on Linux. So hopefully this is a really good first step for NVIDIA to work with the teams that work on the Linux kernel, the core kernel team, and people like Red Hat, who I believe Red Hat maintains Nouveau. I hope I'm right on that, but I believe Red Hat's developers maintain Nouveau. And it could be that in a few years' time, the situation will be just as good for NVIDIA cards on Linux as it is for AMD cards on Linux right now.
Yeah, this is like actually really important, because if people are going to switch to Linux, I just cannot recommend that they do it, honestly, if they're gaming on NVIDIA hardware, because sure, the open source driver exists, but it has the problems you mentioned plus other problems. Like Matt's having it lock up on his system might just be he has a new enough GPU, mobile GPU go ahead.
To be clear, it was the open source drivers I was locking up.
Yes.
The proprietary one seems to work fine, and I can play Minecraft on Linux, no problem.
Likely neither of those are this driver that we're talking about, because this only came out a few days ago, and it's not part of the Linux kernel yet. It's not. It hasn't been merged into the kernel, and it probably won't be merged into the kernel for a long time.
So to finish what I was saying, this is important, because when somebody new gets to Linux and they have an NVIDIA card, they're going to experience what Matt experienced with the open source driver. Maybe if their card's really new, the open source driver isn't ready for it, or it's too slow to game on. And then, maybe Ubuntu has something that's supposed to help you install the proprietary driver, but then sometimes it recommends one, like the wrong one. It'll recommend one that isn't the right one. and then they won't even be able to boot their system at all. And then they'll like blame Linux on that, right? They'll be like, well, this sucks. And and telling them to go into the terminal when they've just first tried Ubuntu is not a good way to sell somebody on Linux, right? Like once they get comfortable with all the GUI tools and stuff, they're going to end up in the terminal. But that's just a bad sell for Linux more broadly. And since so many people have NVIDIA graphics drivers, this is a huge deal, even if it just marginally improves Nouveau at first, and then over time, things get better with Nouveau, or maybe something else comes along even to replace the Nouveau project, because there's now the kernel module is different, and so maybe somebody else will start a new project, or maybe NVIDIA will just keep going and open source more of their stuff, and it'll be maybe more like having an AMD card. And so this is huge. Just not right now, but soon it'll just be better for a new user, and that's like super important. Also, not for nothing, this is useful in the data center. Yeah, for sure. It's if you're using one of their data center GPUs, this driver is in stable quality right now. Yeah, like what are they? Not the Quadro. I forget what they are now. Those ones are workstation. Yeah. I forget what they're called now. The data center ones. I think they're called Titan. Are they Titan? Is that right? I forget. I could be wrong. I sold a whole bunch of them last year and made a whole bunch of money. I know that, but I forget what they're called. Well, that's good news. If you're on a GeForce GPU, this isn't going to help you for a while, but eventually, this is a good start to eventually help you a lot. Hopefully. Yeah. Hopefully. Yeah, that's good news. More open source is better. And like I said, even if it just makes it so people's system is stable enough that even they could just use it for a couple days until I can go in and install the right driver on their system for them or whatever when I'm trying to switch them over, that's good. That's good enough. Because like Matt's a experienced computer user, and he was just having his video lock up right out of the box with Ubuntu, and that's bad. Yeah, I wasn't sure I was going to be able to install it. Luckily, I had another computer that I could look stuff up online about it, and enough other people had the same problem that I was able to figure it out. But anybody else, somebody who's not as technical as I am, or just doesn't have another computer, doesn't have another computer. That's one of the nice things about Pop OS. How and I think more distros should do this. Pop OS has 2 versions of their installer that you can download. It's got one version that is just a normal installer, just like everyone else has, and it's got another version that specifically has the proprietary NVIDIA drivers pre-installed. Nice. Oh, good. That's 3 cheers for Pop. The more I hear about that OS, the better. I also can't wait till their desktop environment that they're making from scratch comes out, because I understand they're building it in Rust, and a lot of people are just very excited about it. So anyway, I guess it's my turn. I only have 3 stories. It'll probably be fairly quick here. Linux is the #1 operating system in space. And it's the #1 operating system on Mars, and it's the only helicopter operating system on Mars. And it was unfortunate when I heard the news last week that the helicopter, it's basically a part of the Mars rover. They have a helicopter. It's basically a drone, that it seemed to not be able to communicate, and everybody assumed it was power. The solar panels either got dirty or wore out. Well, it's back online, and it's back in touch with the rover, and it took a couple pictures just yesterday. I didn't bring up the pictures, but if you're interested in that, definitely look up the Mars rover. It's super cool. There's a lot of Linux going on there, and there's an interview that was done on was it Linux Unplugged on the Jupiter Broadcasting Network, when they had one of the main engineers from that project on, and I just can't recommend that enough. Good interview, solid, and just 3 cheers for that helicopter coming back to life. It's not very often that a piece of electronic equipment on another planet fails and then just wakes back up. But I think, again,
Are you saying that Linux is so great it's out of this world?
That's exactly what I was trying not to say.
Okay.
So also real quick, daily builds for the next version of Ubuntu drop. That'll be 22.10. It will not be a long-term support release. And if you're interested in testing that out and helping out, you should definitely just go download it. It's going to be unstable. You shouldn't install it on anything that you rely on for daily computing, but there's going to be some cool stuff in there. And last, Fedora 36 came out, and the reviews have been really good. If I didn't need everyone and their mother to be able to use the computers here, I would consider switching over. But this is just a great release. It's for people who want a GNOME-based workstation and don't want to use Ubuntu. Ubuntu's reliance on snaps is a big reason some people don't want to use Ubuntu. But the feature set's actually pretty close to Ubuntu 22.4. The current packages are the Kernel 5.17, Mesa 22, which HK was talking about a little bit ago. It's real good for open source graphic drivers, AMD and Intel. The 22, I don't have it on my system, and I hear the release 22.0 is quite good, so I'm looking forward to that. And if you are using the proprietary Nvidia driver, Wayland's the default graphics server. Plus, it has Pipewire right out of the box, so that's pretty interesting. I'm excited to get going on Pipewire myself one of these days, but I don't know. I'm too lazy to figure out how to install it on Ubuntu. So if you're a developer or a power user and you just want to try something new, haven't tried Fedora or haven't been over to that camp in a while, it's probably a great thing to try out. And I think I'm actually going to go ahead and install it on my carry-around laptop and check it out, because I don't think I've used a non-Debian based Ubuntu in like 10 years. So I should probably be seeing what things are like over there. Have you used Fedora recently, either of you?
Nope.
I actually, a couple years ago, I switched to Manjaro. So I haven't really used a Debian-based OS in a few years, other than on servers. All my servers still run Ubuntu. But yeah, I kind of fell in love with Manjaro, but I'd certainly like to give Fedora 36 a try.
Yeah, I mean, all the reviews are real good. There's like people, there's a couple podcasts I listen to where the people are just like in love with Ubuntu Mate, and they're even them have been giving rave reviews to Fedora 36. It's not often that a distro comes out and gets this kind of positive reviews. It's just not, I think the last time I heard like everybody going this positive about a distro was I think it was Ubuntu 18.04 when they switched back to GNOME from Unity. Everybody thought it was really solid and really good. That was the last time. So yeah, that's my whole segment. I was quick this week.
Wow.
All right.
Except for me going overtime.
Well, I was quick this week, but yeah, we went over. That's fine. There is no overtime on this show. We're still figuring it out.
Yeah.
So everybody, I guess I'll read us out. Everybody, thanks for listening. This has been How the Tech Are You? It's a production of Echoplex Media. If you would like to be frightened, amused, or annoyed, you can search for our other podcasts on your podcast apps of choice. And if you get value out of this, give us some money on Patreon, patreon.com/Echoplex. And you can also check out our swag shop, echoplexmedia.com/swag. And I just now committed myself to making swag for this particular show, I suppose.
Yep.
And remember to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube.
I think we have a soundboard clip for that.
Like and subscribe.
Don't forget to follow us on social media for beautiful food and inspiration. Soundboard's off.
Oh, darn.
I'll try to remember to turn it on next week. I just don't think like. Anyway, we have a whole soundboard too. Check out our website, everybody.